The lantern chain snapped at the worst possible moment, 3 seconds before the mob reached the fair's eastern gate. Isaac Sawyer heard the iron link strike the cobblestones and saw the great beacon lantern above the headland gate swing dark. And in that half-second of new shadow, the crowd below shifted and growled like a single restless animal. He was already moving, wedging his way through wool-coated bodies and spilled cider, one hand braced on the wooden beam of a vendor's stall, his eyes locked on the knot of men with torches near the Harvest Fair's main thoroughfare. He had fixed broken chains before. He had climbed the lighthouse at Carruth Point in winds that wanted to tear him from the iron rungs while the sea screamed 40 feet below. He was not afraid of a crowd, but this crowd was different. "There she is," someone shouted, and the sound was ugly, clipped, the kind of word that wasn't really a word at all but a direction for violence. Isaac turned his head and saw her. She was standing at the edge of the spice merchant's stall, perfectly still, the way a person goes still when they've done the math and decided stillness is the only card left to play. She was taller than any woman he'd ever stood next to, taller than most men in this square, with the broad, powerful shoulders of someone who had done real work with her body for every year of her adult life. Her skin was the color of deep river moss after rain, faintly luminous in the torchlight. Her tusks curved in short, sharp ivory arcs from the corners of her lower lip, and her ears came to delicate points. She had dark hair pulled into a loose battle braid that hung over one shoulder, thick and shot through with a single streak of ash white. She was wearing fitted travel leathers the color of charcoal and dry leaves, a laced leather bodice cinched close at her waist over a dark undershirt, leather breeches that tucked into worn knee boots, and a short hooded capelet hanging from one shoulder that had been thrown back so it wouldn't tangle her arms. Everything she wore fitted her like it had been made for her body specifically, functional and unashamed. And she wore it the way a person wears armor, not for beauty, but because it was hers. She was the most striking person Isaac Sawyer had ever seen in his 31 years on this earth, and she was about to be dragged out of the autumn harvest fair of Warden crossing by a mob that had been given permission to be afraid. He didn't decide to move toward her. His legs simply did it. "Back off," he said, stepping between the nearest torch carrier and the woman. The man was barrel-chested, red in the face, wearing the sash of the Merchants' Protection Guild. "She's at a stall. She's shopping. Same as you." "Same as me," the man laughed without any warmth in it. "Brother, you don't know what you're standing in front of." "I know exactly what I'm standing in front of," Isaac said. He was not a large man. He was lean and sun-darkened, with the kind of quiet solidity that comes from years of work in wind and salt air. His hands were scarred at the knuckles from rope work. He had a keeper's horn at his belt instead of a sword, and he'd left his short belt knife back at his rented room because it was a harvest fair. "You want to reach her. You reach her through me." There was a pause. The mob had the shape of a wave that hasn't quite decided whether to break. Then the woman behind him spoke. "I do not need your protection," she said. Her voice was low and controlled and had an accent that moved like stone rolling down a slope, measured, deliberate, and heavy. "Step aside, lighthouse man." He looked back at her over his shoulder. Up close, her eyes were striking amber gold with the kind of steady quality that made you feel studied rather than seen. "You know me," he said, surprised enough that it came out as a question instead of a statement. "You keep the Carruth light," she said with no particular warmth. "I have sailed past your rock twice. Step aside." "With respect," Isaac said, turning back to face the crowd, "I'd rather not." It took another minute. It took the guild sash man calculating the optics of 6 torchbearers crowding a single unarmed lighthouse keeper in front of the full harvest fair crowd, who were watching now, dozens of them, market-goers and farmers and traders and wool merchants, and children on father's shoulders, all of them watching with that particular fairground attention that is both hungry for a show and easily shamed. The guild sash man lowered his torch, said something low to the men beside him. They didn't leave exactly, they redistributed, melting back into the crowd without surrendering the idea, just postponing it. Isaac let out a long, slow breath. He turned around. The woman had not moved. She was looking at him with an expression that was not gratitude and was not quite contempt, but something between them, assessment, raw and unvarnished. "Thank you," she said, and she made the words sound like they cost her something. "You're welcome," Isaac said. "Name's Isaac Sawyer. I do keep the Careth light as it happens." "I know," she said. "I am Rasha Ashwalker." She paused, and he got the sense this was not a name she handed to strangers casually. "I was a war guide for the Ashwalk clan. I am here because I was told the fair at Warden Crossing was neutral ground." "It's supposed to be," Isaac said, glancing at the dispersed mob. "Someone's been riling the Purity Wardens up. They've been at every waypoint between here and the coast last 3 weeks. There's a purge moving through the border settlements, anyone they call unnatural. Mostly it's been orc traders and half-bloods, but they took a river witch last week from what I heard." Rasha's jaw tightened, just slightly. "I am aware of the Wardens," she said. "I have been watching my back for 2 weeks." She reached into the pouch at her hip and placed 2 copper coins on the spice merchant's counter, taking the small bundle of dried mountain sage that the merchant, a nervous little man who had been pretending to arrange his inventory, slid toward her without making eye contact. "The sage is for a debt," she said, to nobody in particular. And then she walked away. Isaac stood there for a moment, watching her move through the crowd, and felt the oddest sensation, not quite longing and not quite the residue of adrenaline, but something in the region between them, warm and persistent, like a coal left in a grate. He bought a meat pie from the adjacent stall, ate half of it standing up, and told himself she was a stranger who had not wanted his help and had made that clear. That held up for about 4 hours. The autumn harvest fair of Warden Crossing was the largest gathering in the Western Territories for 300 miles in any direction. Staged every year at the turn of the deep season when the grain was in, and the apple presses were running, and the long pale light of early autumn made everything look like it was lit from inside. It drew merchants from the inland rivers, fishermen from the coast, clan traders from the northern passes, herbalists, blacksmiths, dye workers, horse breeders, musicians, and every variety of person who had something to sell or something to find. It also drew the Purity Wardens. The Wardens had started as a militia 3 years back, during the border skirmishes between the human settlements and 2 of the northern orc clans. The skirmishes had ended, resolved by a trade treaty that nobody was entirely happy with, which Isaac understood to be the sign of a fair treaty, but the Wardens had not ended with them. They had metastasized into something uglier and less purposeful. They wore white sashes now and traveled in groups and had been given, in several border towns, a thin veneer of legal authority that amounted to: if you can point at someone and say they are unnatural, you may remove them from the fair. Isaac had watched this happen from the lighthouse with the particular detachment of a man whose job was to keep ships from hitting rocks, not to fix the problems of inland towns. He kept the light burning, and he repaired the chains when they broke, and he watched the horizon. That detachment had lasted until about 3 seconds before the lantern chain snapped. He found Rasha again at dusk, not because he went looking, or that was what he told himself, ignoring the fact that he had walked the fairground in a systematic east-to-west pattern that was, if he was honest with himself, a search. But because she was the person sitting alone at the far end of the long trestle table nearest the eastern bonfire, eating something from a wooden bowl with the contained private manner of someone who has been eating alone for long enough that it has stopped being loneliness and become preference. There were other people at the table. None of them sat within 6 feet of her. Isaac walked to the table, set down his own bowl, a thick barley stew from the communal pot, and sat down at the empty spot directly to her left, which was close enough that the bench shifted under him when he settled his weight. She looked at him with those amber gold eyes. "You followed me," she said. "I was hungry," Isaac said. This was the nearest table. She looked at the 4 other empty tables within 30 feet of them and said nothing, which he respected. They ate in silence for a while. The bonfire popped and sent a column of sparks spiraling upward into the indigo sky. Somewhere across the fair, a fiddle player was warming up, the sound of it thin and bright in the cool air. "The wardens were told I am a clan scout traveling ahead of a raiding party," Rasha said without preamble. Isaac set down his spoon. "Are you?" She gave him a look so flat and level that it almost made him smile. "I am traveling alone with a mule and a debt bundle of trade goods," she said. "There is no raid. I left my clan 8 months ago to fulfill a debt walk. I owe a debt of honor to a woman named Gara Stonevoice, who is a human herbalist living near the Warden Delta. I am carrying the sage and 3 other components she needs for a healing compound. I have been traveling alone for 8 months. I have no raiding party. Who told the wardens you did?" "I do not know," she said. "Someone who wanted me gone, or worse." She returned to her stew. "I did not come here to make trouble." "I know," Isaac said. She looked at him again, and this time it was different, not flat, not assessing, but something more tentative, like a door opened a crack to see what the weather is doing. "How do you know?" she said. "Because you bought sage for a herbalist instead of a weapon," he said. "And because someone who wanted trouble wouldn't be sitting at the edge of the light trying to be invisible." A pause. "You are perceptive for a man who keeps a lighthouse," she said. "There's not much to do on a rock in the sea except watch things and think about them," he said. The fiddle across the fair had found its footing and begun something fast and bright, and from where they sat they could hear the fair's main square filling up with the noise of the harvest dance, feet on boards, voices, laughter, the deep thrum of a standing drum joining the fiddle. Rasha looked toward the sound, and something crossed her face, something unguarded, there and gone. "You should stay near the fair center tonight," Isaac said. "Wardens work the edges after dark. More cover." "I am aware of how they work," she said. "I know," he said. "I'm saying it anyway." He stood up, taking his bowl. "I'm going to the dance, if you want to know," she said. The word was quiet and absolute, and he understood that it was not an invitation to negotiate. He nodded, accepted it, and went. The harvest dance was in full riot by the time he arrived at the main square, which had been cleared of stalls and fitted with boards over the cobblestones to make a dance floor. Paper lanterns on wires crisscrossed overhead in orange and gold, and the musicians, 3 fiddlers now and a drummer, and a woman with a set of bone pipes, were playing something that made it physically difficult to stand still. Isaac knew nobody here, which was nothing new. He had grown up not quite in Warden Crossing and not quite outside it, a lighthouse keeper's son who had become a lighthouse keeper himself, which meant he existed at the edge of things, always visible on his headland, always necessary, rarely known. He watched other people dance and ate an apple someone had left on a barrel and thought about Rasha Ashwalker and her 8-month debt walk, and the total absence of self-pity in the way she described it. She was at the dance floor an hour later. She had not gone to dance. She had positioned herself at the edge of the crowd where she could see both exits, standing with her arms loosely crossed and her capelet pulled up over her hair. She was watching the dancers the way Isaac had watched her earlier in the crowd, with that complete, assessing attention that took everything in and gave nothing back. He made his way to her. "You said no," he said. "I said no to dancing," she said. "I said nothing about watching." "Fair enough," he said, and stood beside her. They watched the dance together for a while. A pair of farmhands were doing something aggressively energetic in the center that was either a dance or a fight, and the crowd around them seemed genuinely uncertain which it was. The bone pipe player was very good. She played runs up and down the scale with her eyes closed, swaying slightly, fully somewhere else. "In my clan," Rasha said very quietly, "the harvest dance is for claiming." She paused. "You dance with someone to say you intend them for a partner. It is not casual the way it appears to be here. So watching means something different to you," Isaac said. "Watching is safe," she said. "Dancing is a declaration." He turned to look at her profile, the strong line of her jaw, the slight forward set of her head that meant she was thinking something she wasn't saying. "Would you want to dance?" he said. "If it weren't a declaration." She didn't answer for a moment. Then, without looking at him, "Ask me." He turned to face her. "Rasha Ashwalker," he said, "would you like to dance?" Her eyes came to his face, measuring. "No," she said, but the no was different from the first one, softer, almost apologetic. "Not tonight." He nodded once, turned back to the music. "All right." They stood there together for another half an hour, shoulders occasionally brushing as the crowd shifted and compressed around the dance floor, and neither of them moved away. The next morning, Isaac found a Warden broadsheet nailed to the post outside the inn where he was staying. It had a crude, woodcut print of a tall figure with tusks and the words OATHBRAKER, ASHWALK clan warrant issued, printed in heavy letters above a description that matched Rasha Ashwalker precisely. Tall, green-skinned, dark-braided hair, traveling alone, possibly armed. He pulled it off the post and stood looking at it in the gray morning light. She had not told him about the warrant. He found her at the mule paddock behind the fairground's livestock pens, where she was methodically checking the load straps on the back of a gray mule that had the look of an animal that had come a long way and didn't particularly want to come further. She was running a hand along the mule's flank, murmuring something in the low, guttural cadence of the Ashwalk tongue, and the mule had its ears rotated toward her with an expression of resigned trust. He held up the broadsheet without speaking. She looked at it. Her expression did not change in any way that he could have described clearly, but something in her went very still. "Oathbreaker," he read. "That's a serious charge." "It is a lie," she said without heat. "What really happened?" She turned back to the mule straps. For a moment he thought she wasn't going to answer, and he thought about asking differently, and then she said, "My warband was sent by the clan elder to enforce a treaty boundary near the Warden Delta 2 years ago. A human settlement had built a mill on Ashwalk water rights. We were told to remove the mill. We removed the mill." She pulled a strap through its buckle with a clean, practiced motion. 3 men were injured. No one was killed. The mill was rebuilt within the month by the same family, and the same family's cousin is a Merchants Guild officer in Warden Crossing. She glanced at him. "The warrant is not about the mill. It's about the water rights," Isaac said. "It is about profit," she said. "The warrant removes me from the picture and removes the Ashwalk's legal claim to the water rights simultaneously, because I was the one who registered the claim with the border court 3 years ago." She took the broadsheet from him without asking, folded it precisely, and put it in the saddlebag. "I have been trying to reach Gara Stonevoice before the wardens reach me. She is a registered treaty herbalist. She can file a counterclaim with the border adjudicator that supersedes the warrant. So the sage isn't just a debt," Isaac said. "It is both," Rasha said, with the faintest thinning of her lips that he was beginning to suspect was the way she smiled when she didn't want to. "I owe Gara Stonevoice a personal debt from before all of this. The fact that she can also help me is convenient," Isaac said. "Yes," she said, "convenient." He thought about the warrant. About the wardens who would be moving through the fair today with it, showing it to guild officers and innkeepers and stall holders, building the infrastructure of a legalish persecution that was really just a mill owner's profit motive in a white sash. "How far to Gara Stonevoice?" he said. "The Warden Delta is 2 days' ride from here," Rasha said. "If the roads are passable." "The roads are passable," Isaac said. "I came up them 6 days ago." He looked at the mule, then at the gray sky, then at her. "I've got a horse, and I'm not due back to the lighthouse for 9 days. She looked at him with that steady amber gaze. "Why?" she said. "Why what? Why would you ride 2 days to the Delta for a stranger?" He thought about it honestly, which felt like the only fair thing to do. "Because you haven't done anything wrong," he said. "Because the warrant is a lie, and you know it and I know it. And the only reason it has any power is that nobody around here will say so out loud. And because I've been keeping a lighthouse for 7 years and watching ships steer clear of rocks and thinking it was enough." He paused. "Maybe it's not enough." Rasha Ashwalker looked at him for a long time. The mule shifted. The fairground was waking up around them, smoke rising from cookfires, the distant sound of a hammer starting up at the blacksmith's stall. "You cannot come with me," she said. "I will not put a man I barely know in the path of a warden warrant." I'm not asking your permission, Isaac said gently. I'm telling you my plan. You can ride ahead of me if you want, but I'm going to the delta anyway. She made a sound that was not quite a laugh, something shorter and more surprised than that, and turned back to the mule. You are a strange man, Isaac Sawyer, she said. Probably, he agreed. They left the fair at mid-morning by the southwest gate, Rasha on her gray mule and Isaac on a stout bay horse he'd rented from the fair's livestock agent. The road south through the valley was wide and dry, bordered by apple orchards stripped to their last red stragglers and fields of pale harvested stubble. The sky was the clear pale blue of late autumn, high and cold. They rode side by side where the road allowed, and Rasha did not talk much, but Isaac had spent enough time in silence not to be troubled by it. He talked when something worth saying occurred to him, and went quiet when it didn't, and gradually he noticed that she began to do the same, offering a comment on the road conditions, noting a good campsite she recognized from a previous journey, pointing out the tracks of a large animal at a muddy ford with the brief, matter-of-fact expertise of someone who has read the land for years. By the time they made camp at a sheltered bend of the river on the first evening, with a small fire and the horses and mule picketed nearby, they had established the shape of a conversation that was still wary but was no longer distant. Isaac made tea from the supplies in his pack and handed her a tin cup without ceremony, and she wrapped both hands around it and watched the river go dark in the gathering dusk and said, "Tell me about the lighthouse." So he did. He told her about Carruth Point, which was a granite headland that stuck out into the deep water like a stubborn chin, and about the lighthouse that his father had kept before him. A thick stone tower 60 feet high with a rotating beacon, powered by a clockwork mechanism that needed winding every 4 hours during a storm watch. He told her about the sound the sea made in February when the gales came in from the west, a sound so deep and total that it ceased to be noise and became something more like weather inside your chest. He told her about the ships he'd helped bring in and the one he hadn't, a fishing vessel from up the coast that had gone down on the rocks in a fog so thick that even the light hadn't reached far enough, and how he'd found a carved wooden fish in the wreckage when the storm cleared, and had kept it on the windowsill of the light room ever since. Rasha listened with the quality of attention that meant she was actually listening, not just waiting for her turn to speak. "Do you ever want to leave it?" she said. "Yes," he said honestly. "And then the light comes on at dusk and I can see it from the shore and I know there's a sailor out there on the water who can see it too and I stop wanting to leave." She looked at him over the fire. "That is a good reason to stay somewhere," she said. "What about you?" he said. "You left your clan." "I was not expelled," she said quickly, and he heard the edge in it. "I didn't say that," he said. She let out a breath. "No, you did not." She looked at the fire. "The debt walk is a choice. In our tradition, if you owe a debt of honor to someone outside the clan, you walk it out yourself, no escort, no support. You go, you fulfill the debt, you return. It is supposed to take months. Mine has taken longer than expected. Because of the warrant." "Because of the warrant," she agreed. "Every time I got close to the delta, the wardens had broadsheets in the nearest settlement. I have been taking long routes, staying off the main roads." She picked up a stick and turned it in her hands. 8 months is a long time to travel alone." "Yes," Isaac said quietly, "it is." She looked up at him, and something in the firelight made her look different. Not softer exactly, but less defended, the way people look when they're tired and it's late, and the fire is warm enough that the effort of appearing invulnerable stops feeling worth it. "You do not ask questions the way most people ask questions," she said. "How do most people ask?" "Like they are looking for confirmation of what they already decided to think," she said. "You ask like you actually want the answer." "I do actually want the answer," Isaac said. She was quiet for a moment, looking at him with that measuring amber gaze that he was beginning to find less unnerving and more like something he wanted to stay in the path of. "I am going to sleep," she said, which was not the thing he thought she was going to say. She moved to her bedroll with the contained, decisive quality she brought to everything, and lay down with her back to the fire, and said without turning over, "Isaac." "Yes, thank you," she said. "Again, for the broadsheet." He sat with the fire for a while after that, feeding its small branches and listening to the river, and thought about the way his name had sounded in her voice, which was not a thought he could do much with but which kept coming back anyway. They reached Gara Stonevice's compound at the Warden Delta on the afternoon of the second day. It was a larger operation than Isaac had expected, a stone house with an adjacent workshop and a drying shed, surrounded by the structured beds of a serious working herb garden, the last of the season's plants cut down to their crowns and mulched for winter. A woman came out of the workshop at the sound of hooves on the path, middle-aged, gray-streaked dark hair, with ink-stained hands and the sharp, composed bearing of someone who had spent years being competent in situations other people found difficult. Rasha dismounted before the mule had fully stopped, and the two women looked at each other for a held moment before Gara Stonevice said, "You look worse than I expected." "I have been traveling 8 months, Rasha said. "Come inside," Gara said. "Both of you," she added, looking at Isaac with a raised eyebrow that suggested he was an unexpected addition she would evaluate in due course. What happened inside the stone house over the next 2 hours was the thing Rasha had ridden 8 months to accomplish. She produced the bundle of trade goods from the mule's pack, the mountain sage, a vial of deep-tied kelp oil, a small clay pot of northern clay mineral, and a bundle of dried marshroot, and laid them on Gara's worktable one by one. Gara examined each item with careful hands, smelled them, held them to the light, and set them aside. When the last item was placed, she stood back and said, "This is the full sum." "Yes," Rasha said. "The debt is cleared," Gara said formally. Something shifted in Rasha's bearing, not visible to anyone who hadn't been watching her for 2 days, but Isaac saw it. A slight fall of her shoulders, a long exhale, the departure of something that had been held tightly for 8 months. "About the warrant," Isaac said from where he was standing near the door. Gara looked at him again. "You told him," she said to Rasha. "He had a copy of the broadsheet," Rasha said, "and he is not a fool." Gara sat down at the worktable and folded her hands. "I have been corresponding with the border adjudicator since I first heard about the warrant 3 months ago," she said. "I filed the counterclaim documentation on behalf of the Ashwalker rights 6 weeks ago. The adjudicator's ruling came back 2 weeks ago." She opened a drawer and produced a sealed document. "The warrant is invalid. The Mill family's claim was dismissed. The Ashwalker rights are confirmed." She slid the document across the table toward Rasha. "I was waiting for you to arrive in person so I could give you the original." Rasha looked at the document on the table. She did not pick it up immediately. She stood very still, and Isaac watched her face and saw the thing that came before she was able to stop it, a brief, unguarded crack in the composure, eyes going bright for just a second before she reached out and took the document, and when she turned it over in her hands her face was collected again but her knuckles were white. "The Warden's in Warden Crossing," Isaac said. "They don't know about the ruling yet." "No," Gara said. "But once you present that document to the Fairs Guild overseer, the warrant is legally null. The Wardens have no authority to touch her." Rasha looked up from the document at Isaac. He was already thinking about the road back. They stayed the night at Gara Stonevice's compound, sleeping in the guest room with its narrow twin beds and the smell of dried herbs thick in the walls, and in the morning ate bread and strong tea and the best preserved plum preserves Isaac had ever tasted. Gara gave them a second document, a certified copy of the counterclaim for their own records, and the address of the border adjudicator's nearest registry in case the guild overseer at Warden Crossing made difficulties. As they were preparing to leave, Gara caught Isaac alone for a moment at the gate while Rasha was reloading the mule. "How did you come to be traveling with her?" Gara said. "She didn't want me to," Isaac said. Gara looked at him with the same evaluating attention that Rasha had, and he began to understand that this was probably a quality Gara had and that Rasha had learned from her, because the debt between them ran deeper than trade goods in 8 months. She doesn't trust easily, Gara said. Hasn't for a long time. The warrant took something from her. I know, Isaac said. She is a proud woman, Gara said. Asking for help is harder than you might think. She didn't ask, Isaac said. I just came. Gara looked at him for a moment more. Good, she said. The road back to Warden Crossing was not as easy as the road south. A hard rain came in on the first afternoon, turning the valley roads to red clay mud that clung to hooves and slowed them to a plodding, miserable pace. They sheltered under a stand of alder trees while the worst of it passed, standing close because the tree cover was not wide and the rain came sideways. Rasha had her hood pulled up and her arms crossed against the cold, and Isaac was close enough to feel the warmth coming off her, and they stood like that without speaking while the rain hammered the trees and the horses stamped unhappily. Can I ask you something? Isaac said. You generally do, Rasha said, and there it was again, that thin compression of her lips there and gone. What happens after, he said. Once the warrant is cleared and the water rights are confirmed, what happens to you? She was quiet for a moment, watching the rain. I go home, she said. I return to the clan, I report the completion of the debt walk. There is a ceremony, she paused. And then I am a war guide without a war. The borders have been quiet for 2 years. The Ashwalk don't need a guide right now. She said it with absolute matter-of-factness, but he heard the shape of the thing behind it. A woman who had been necessary, who had been the person who knew the land and kept people safe in it, coming home to find the land already mapped and the people already safe without her. You could stay near the coast, Isaac said. There's plenty of use for someone who reads land and weather the way you do. The Delta traders always need guides who know the back roads. The border court adjudicators need field officers. She turned her head to look at him, and their faces were very close because the tree was not wide. You are making plans for my life, she said. I'm describing options, he said. There's a difference. She held his gaze for a count of several heartbeats. The rain was easing. Drops fell from the alder branches in a slow, steady drip. Why does it matter to you what happens to me after? She said. He didn't look away from her. You know why, he said. The rain stopped, and they rode on, and neither of them said anything more about it for the rest of the day. But that evening, when they made camp at the ford where they'd stopped before, and Isaac had the fire going and the tea made, Rasha sat down not across the fire from him as she had the first night but beside him, close enough that their knees were almost touching, and he felt this with the specific, concentrated attention of a man who is trying very hard not to make too much of something and failing completely. They ate, and she leaned back on her hands and looked at the stars coming out above the valley and said, The Ashwalk name for this time of year is the walking season. The harvest is done and the clan is fed and the guides take their debt walks in the last warm days before the deep cold. Is it always a solo walk? Isaac said. Always, she said. The point is that you go alone. You face the debt with your own 2 feet. She glanced at him sideways. I did not ask you to come with me. I know, he said. You should know, she said slowly, as though she was working out what she wanted to say while she was saying it, that in Ashwalk custom, when someone follows a debt walker without being asked, it is considered a significant thing. What kind of significant? Isaac said carefully. The kind where the clan would look at you and ask what your intentions were, she said. The fire crackled. A night bird called from across the ford, its voice carrying clearly in the cold air. And what would you tell them? Isaac said. Rasha looked at the fire. The light moved across her face, warm and shifting. I would tell them, she said slowly, that I had not decided yet. She paused, but that I was considering it seriously. He sat with that and didn't push it, and she seemed to appreciate the not pushing, because she stayed beside him for another hour before she went to her bedroll, and said good night the way people say it when they mean something more than just the night. They were back at Warden Crossing by midday of the 3rd day, riding in through the north gate with mud on their boots and the sealed document in Rasha's saddlebag. The fair was in its 3rd and busiest day, the square packed, the noise overwhelming after 2 days of road and river sounds. Isaac could smell roasting meat and wood smoke and the sharp sweetness of the cider press, and underneath it all, slightly wrong, the charred pitch smell of torches burning in daylight, which meant the wardens were out. He saw 3 of them at the guild overseer's table near the center gate, big men in white sashes, with the warrant broadsheet pinned to the table in front of them, showing it to passers-by and asking questions. One of them had an actual iron-bound ledger, which meant he had some form of official authority, which meant this was going to require more than just telling them about the counterclaim. "There," Rasha said quietly beside him. "I see them," Isaac said. "We need to go to the guild overseer first." "Not the wardens. The overseer has authority over the warrant issuance. If we present the document to him, he can nullify the warrant before the wardens see us." "Do you know who the overseer is?" Rasha said. "I've met him," Isaac said. "Aldrich Moss. He was at Carruth Point 2 years ago for the lighthouse inspection. He's a fair man." "Fair men make political decisions when the crowd is large enough," Rasha said. "Yes," Isaac said, "which is why we do this in public in daylight with the document in hand." The guild overseer's station was on the far side of the fair's central square, a raised platform with a canopy and a table, where Aldrich Moss, a stout, florid-faced man in his 50s with a guild chain around his neck, was currently adjudicating a dispute between 2 textile merchants. Isaac and Rasha moved through the crowd with Rasha's hood up, which helped enough that they made it to the platform steps before one of the wardens near the center gate looked up from his ledger and saw them. "Sawyer," Aldrich Moss said, surprised and not unpleased. "What brings you in from the Rock?" "Official business," Isaac said, and he stepped up onto the platform without being invited. "This is Rasha Ashwalker." He said her name loudly and clearly, the way you say a name when you want 30 people around you to hear it. She carries a certified ruling from the border adjudicator's office nullifying the oathbreaker warrant issued against her. There was a shift in the crowd nearest the platform. The textile merchants turned to look. People stopped. Rasha stepped up beside him, produced the sealed document from her saddlebag, and placed it on the table in front of Aldrich Moss. Moss looked at it. He looked at Rasha. He looked at the document again, peeling back the border adjudicator's seal with careful fingers and reading the first page. The wardens arrived at the platform steps. "Overseer Moss," the one with the ledger said, "that woman is under a valid warrant. The warrant is before me for review," Moss said without looking up. He was reading. "It's a warden warrant. You don't have jurisdiction." "I have jurisdiction over every warrant issued at this fair and every document presented within the fair's boundary," Moss said, in a voice that was calm and heavy as a millstone. "Stand back, please." The warden did not stand back. He took 1 step up the platform stairs, and Isaac moved 1 step to the side to put himself between the warden and the table, and there was a moment, a sharp, crystalline second, where the day could have gone several directions. Then Aldrich Moss looked up from the document. "This ruling is valid," he said. "Issued by Regional Adjudicator Vane, stamped and sealed, dated 2 weeks prior. The warrant is null." He looked at the warden. "As of this moment." Publicly. He raised his voice, and Isaac understood that Moss was doing something deliberate, something that required a certain kind of courage of his own. "Let it be known at this fair that the warrant issued against Rasha Ashwalker of the Ashwalk clan is void. The oathbreaker charge is dismissed by order of the regional court. Any warden action taken against this individual from this point forward is an illegal act." The fair crowd, which had stopped to watch with that hungry, fairground attention Isaac recognized from 3 days ago, absorbed this in a long, collective breath. The warden with the ledger looked at Isaac with an expression that was not yet done, that still held possibility of worse. He was a large man, and his 2 companions were right behind him. Isaac looked back at him, his hands loose at his sides, his keeper's horn at his belt and his belt knife back in his room, which he was, again, regretting. "You want to make a scene at a public fair over a void warrant," Isaac said quietly, "with 200 people watching and the guild overseer right there." The warden stared at him for a long, measuring moment, Then he stepped back. The crowd exhaled. And then, because the day was full of things Isaac had not planned, the warden's hand went to his belt, and the knife he drew was not a belt knife but a long hunting blade, and he was not looking at Isaac when he drew it. He was looking at Rasha. What happened next happened in the space between heartbeats, which is the space where the body moves before the mind has finished deciding. The warden lunged up the platform stairs with the hunting blade raised, and Rasha dropped and pivoted Warguide's muscle memory, 8 months of solo road and years before that of knowing how to survive, and the knife came down toward the space where she had been, and Isaac was already moving, and what he did was not heroic in the planned sense. It was just the thing his body did, which was to put himself directly in the path of the blade. It caught him across the forearm. The blade was going for Rasha's throat. It caught Isaac's forearm instead because he had thrown his left arm up and forward, and the cut was long but not deep, a burning line from wrist to elbow that he registered with the specific cold clarity of genuine injury before the rest of it caught up. The warden's momentum carried him forward, and Rasha, who had already pivoted and was no longer where she had been, came back around with both hands and a controlled, devastating shoulder strike that sent the man sideways off the platform stairs and into the crowd, which parted for him like water, and he hit the cobblestones hard, and the knife skidded away from his hand. The other 2 wardens looked at the man on the cobblestones, at the blade 3 feet from his hand, and at Rasha standing on the platform with her weight balanced and her amber eyes very cold and bright, and neither of them moved. Aldrich Moss was already on his feet. "Remove these men," he said to the fair guards who were arriving at a jog, and it was done. Isaac was sitting on the platform steps with his back against the railing, holding his left forearm with his right hand, watching blood soak through his sleeve. Rasha was beside him before he had finished sitting down. She dropped to one knee on the step below him, pulled his arm toward her, and looked at the cut with the focused, clinical attention of someone who had assessed wounds before. "It needs binding," she said. "I know," he said. She was already pulling the tie from her braid, which she wrapped twice around his forearm with a firm, precise pressure that compressed the cut and staunched the bleeding. He watched her hands work strong, careful, sure of themselves, and felt the warmth from them through his sleeve, and felt something else too, which was that she was shaking slightly, not visibly but in the way he could feel through her grip. "You stepped in front of the knife," she said very quietly. "Yes," he said. "He was trying to kill me," she said. "Yes," he said again. She looked up from his arm. Her face was very close. The amber eyes were doing something he hadn't seen in them before, something less contained, something that had been hit hard enough to come loose from its moorings. "You stepped in front of a knife for me," she said. "You are bleeding." "I'm aware," Isaac said. "Why?" she said, and it was not really a question. It was the demand of a person who needed to hear something said out loud because they couldn't trust the version of it living in their own chest. "Because I couldn't let it happen," Isaac said. "Because you matter." He held her gaze. "Because you matter to me." She looked at him for a long time on those platform steps, with the fair noise resuming around them, with Aldrich Moss doing something official behind them, with the crowd reassembling itself into the ordinary morning business of a harvest fair. She looked at him the way she had looked at the fire on the last night at the ford, and he recognized the quality of it now. It was the look of a woman who had been alone for long enough that being seen by someone felt like a threat rather than a gift, and who was, despite that, not looking away. "The wound needs proper dressing," she said at last. "Come." She helped him up, and she kept his forearm in her hands, and they walked across the fairground in broad daylight with the crowd parting around them, and neither of them spoke about anything except the wound until it was dressed. The fair's medical tent was on the western edge of the ground, run by a young surgeon named Pella who asked no questions about how the injury had occurred, cleaned and stitched the cut with brisk competence, wrapped it in clean linen, and charged Isaac 2 silver coins, which Rasha paid before he could reach his own purse, and he let her because she had a particular expression on her face that suggested arguing would be counterproductive. They sat outside the medical tent afterward on an upturned barrel and a water trough, respectively, in the thin autumn sunlight. "Tell me something," Rasha said. "Anything," Isaac said. "The lighthouse," she said. "Does it take two to keep it?" He looked at her. "It doesn't require two," he said carefully. "My father kept it alone, I keep it alone, but there's work enough for two, and the house is large." He paused. "Why?" She was looking at the ground between them. She was pressing her thumb against the inside of her opposite wrist, not nervously, he thought, but deliberately, the way people do when they are working up to something. "I have the water rights document," she said. "I have the counterclaim. When the Wardens are reported to the regional authority, the purge they've been running will lose its legal standing. The border settlements will be safer." She paused. "I have completed the debt walk. I have no specific place I am required to be." "Rasha," Isaac said, "I am telling you that I have considered your question," she said, "about what happens after." The thin sunlight was warm on the side of his face. The fair moved around them, oblivious and bright. "And," he said. She looked up at him. The amber eyes were clear and still and completely certain in the way of a person who has made a decision after a very long deliberation and is done with the deliberation. "Ask me to dance," she said. His heart did something complicated. "We're not at the dance," he said. "Ask me anyway." He understood that this was not about dancing. He had understood that from the first time when she'd said dancing is a declaration. He straightened and turned fully to face her and said it plainly. "Rasha Ashwalker," he said, "would you like to dance?" She looked at him for a moment in which he would admit privately, not breathing. "Yes," she said. The harvest dance that evening was louder than the first night. The fair in its final and most reckless hours, the musicians playing as though they were racing the end of something. The paper lanterns overhead had been multiplied by a dozen more strings, and they lit the square in amber and gold. And the crowd was made of farmers and fishermen and traders and clan folk and half-bloods, and every other variety of person who had come to Warden Crossing for the autumn and found something worth staying for. Isaac and Rasha came to the dance floor from the eastern approach, walking side by side, and people looked, of course they looked. People always looked at Rasha, and more than a few of them recognized the woman from the platform incident that had been the talk of the fair all afternoon, but he was done caring about who looked, and so, he could tell, was she. He held out his hand. She looked at it, looked at him. The thin compression of her lips was different this time. Not held back amusement, but something more deliberate, more open and unmistakable now. She put her hand in his. Her hand was larger than his and stronger, the calluses of her fingers against his palm, the warmth of her solid and real. He brought them onto the dance floor, and she moved with him with the easy confidence of a body that knows how to occupy space. And after the first bar of the fiddle tune, she was matching his pace and then leading it. And he let her, because she was better at it than him, and because letting her felt like the rightest thing he had done in a long time. They danced through two fast tunes and into a slower third, and the slower third was when everything changed, when the distance between them closed and her free hand came to the back of his shoulder, and his came to her waist, and they were close enough that he could feel the warmth of her breath on his temple. "You are going to ask me to stay," she said very quietly in his ear. "I am," he said. "At the lighthouse," she said. "Yes. And what would I do at a lighthouse?" She said, and there was something in her voice, a warmth, a private amusement, a want that she was no longer hiding. "Keep the light with me," he said. "Know the roads when I need them known. Stay." He turned his head to look at her, which brought their faces close enough that he could see the individual amber lights in her eyes. "I have been alone on that rock for 7 years, Rasha. I would very much like to not be alone on it anymore." She held his gaze. "I told you," she said, "dancing is a declaration." "I know," he said. "Then you know what it means," she said, "that I said yes." He did know. He had understood it from the moment she said it, but hearing her say he knew made it real in a different way, made it a thing between two people instead of a thing he was hoping for unilaterally. "I know what it means," he said, "and I want it." Good, she said, with absolute finality, and she pulled him a fraction closer and they danced. Later, much later, when the musicians had played themselves out and the lanterns were burning low, and the square had thinned to the last few determined dancers, and the sleepers who had fallen asleep against walls and barrels, Isaac and Rasha walked to the eastern edge of the fairground where the bonfire was down to deep orange coals. They stood near it for warmth, and the coals turned their faces the color of firelight, and Rasha looked at his bandaged arm. "How is it?" she said. "Sore," he said honestly, "but fine. It'll heal." She reached out and wrapped her hand around his forearm gently, careful of the bandage, and she held it for a moment before she looked up at him. And what he saw in her face now was what he had been seeing build for 4 days, piece by piece, layer by layer, the full, unguarded thing without the composure over it. "In Ashwalk custom," she said, "when someone puts their body between yours and a blade, it creates a debt of honor." "I don't want a debt," Isaac said. "I know," she said. "That is why I am not offering one." She held his gaze. "I am saying that when I look at you, Isaac Sawyer, what I feel is not debt." She paused. "It is harder to name than debt, and less comfortable." "I know the feeling," he said. Her free hand came up to his jaw, deliberate and unhurried, and she tipped his face toward hers, and when she kissed him it was not tentative. It was a woman who had decided, completely and without reservation, and was acting on the decision. It was warm and real and tasted like apple cider from the booth 2 rows over, and her thumb was at his cheekbone and his good hand was at her waist, and the bonfire coals gave them their small, warm circle in the dark autumn fairground, and it lasted for a long time. When she pulled back, she was looking at him with eyes that were entirely open. "The lighthouse," she said. "Tell me about the house." He laughed, a genuine, surprised laugh, and she looked startled by it for a second, and then the thin line of her mouth became a real smile, full and warm, the first real smile he had seen on her, and it made his heart do the complicated thing again. "The house is attached to the base of the tower," he said. 3 rooms, a kitchen with a good hearth, the keeper's study, a bedroom." He paused. "It is very quiet except when it's very loud." "I can sleep through storms," she said. "I know," he said. "You slept through one on the road." She tilted her head, acknowledging this. "The mule will need a paddock." "There's one," he said. "It needs repair. The fence post on the south end went in the last storm." "I can fix a fence post," she said. "I know you can," he said. They stood by the cooling fire, and the fair was quiet around them, and the night was cold and clear with a half-moon rising above the valley's eastern ridge. "There is one other matter," Rasha said. "Tell me." "The warrant," she said. "The wardens in Warden Crossing acted illegally today. Aldrich Moss witnessed it. The border adjudicator's office needs to know. If the Warden organization is not challenged formally, they will continue, the purge will continue in other settlements, against other people." "I know," Isaac said. "I've been thinking about that." "I intend to file a formal complaint with the border court," she said. "In person, with my name on it." She met his eyes. "It will make me visible. The Warden organization has people in many settlements and they will push back. It is not without risk." "No," Isaac said. "If you are going to be near me," she said, "you should know that I do not intend to be quiet about injustice to preserve my own comfort." "I know," he said. "That's one of the things He stopped, recalibrated. "That's one of the things about you." She looked at him steadily. "Say the whole sentence." He looked back at her. "That's one of the things I love about you," he said. The words sat between them in the cool night air. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said very quietly, "It is early to say that word." "Yes," he said, "it is. I said it anyway." She looked at him for a long time, and then she did the thing she did when something cost her. She inhaled slowly and let it out. "I will stay," she said, "at the lighthouse, and I will learn the light tending and the rope work and the fence post repair. And I will walk the road to Warden Crossing when the court needs walking, and I will put my name on complaints when they need names." She paused. "And in the walking season, when my clan holds the ceremony for returned debt walkers, I will bring you." She held his gaze. "If you are willing to stand in front of the Ashwalk clan and be introduced as the man who followed a debt walker unbidden." What do they do to men who follow debt walkers unbidden? Isaac said. They ask you if you are serious, she said. I'll tell them yes, he said. They will test you, she said. They are not gentle tests. I'm not gentle, he said. The thin compression of her lips appeared, and this time it went all the way to a real smile, and she held out her hand to him the way she had when he offered his on the dance floor. He took it. In the 3 days that followed the fair's end, the long process of formal complaint filing at Aldrich Moss's guild table, the depositions taken from the fairground witnesses by a regional court recorder who arrived on the 3rd day, Isaac Sawyer and Rasha Ashwalker were together for almost every hour of it, and the constant close proximity that had charged every accidental brush and shared campfire and dancing warmth accumulated now into something different. The simple, solid comfort of two people who have decided on each other and are building the shape of what that means. The complaint was filed with 7 signatures: Aldrich Moss's, Isaac's, 2 textile merchants who had seen the knife drawn on the platform, a clan trader who had been harassed at the fair's north gate the previous year, Pella the surgeon who had treated Isaac's arm, and Rasha Ashwalker's own, written in the firm, angular script of the Ashwalk formal hand at the bottom of the page. The court recorder sealed it and told them the Warden organization would receive formal notification within 10 days, and that the regional adjudicator was, he could say unofficially, already motivated to act on the matter given the accumulation of complaints from border settlements over the previous 2 years. It will not happen overnight, the recorder said. Nothing good does, Rasha said, and glanced at Isaac sideways in a way that made the recorder clear his throat and look at his papers. The fair broke on the 5th morning, stalls coming down, traders loading wagons, the cheerful, chaotic exodus of 500 people who all needed to be somewhere else before the first serious frost. Isaac returned the bay horse to the livestock agent and arranged to have the mule boarded for the week, while Rasha completed the last of her court business in Warden Crossing. He secured a position on a coastal trader's cart heading south to the Carruth Point headland, which was the fastest way back to the lighthouse before the sea weather turned. On the last evening in Warden Crossing, with her mule boarded and the documents settled, and the town returning to its ordinary off-season quiet, Rasha and Isaac sat at the trestle table by the eastern bonfire, now cold, the fair banked and packed up around them, the square empty of everything except blowing leaves and the debris of 5 days of human celebration. 1 week, Isaac said. I'll have the south paddock fence repaired and the house aired. The lamp oil needs ordering, but there's enough for the month. I can bring mountain herb oil, Rasha said. It burns cleaner than rendered lamp oil for the closework lanterns. I didn't know that, Isaac said. There are things I know, she said deadpan, that you do not. There are many things you know that I don't, he said. She looked at the cold fire ring. The wind moved her braid across her shoulder. Isaac, she said. Yes. I want to say something I have not said before, she said, in the careful, deliberate way she said things that mattered. So you hear it from me clearly. He waited. I have been a war guide and a debt walker and a person who has carried things alone for a very long time, she said. I do not need rescuing. I did not need you to come with me on the road to the Delta, and I did not need you to step in front of that knife, and I did not need you to stand at that table with me. She paused. But you came anyway. You came because you wanted to, because you felt it was right. She looked at him. I have not had someone come because they wanted to for a very long time. I had almost decided it did not happen. Her voice was even and steady and completely unguarded, which was harder to hear than anger would have been. You happened, Isaac Sawyer. I did not expect you, and I did not plan for you, and I said no to you 4 times before I said yes, and I am telling you now that the yes meant everything I knew it meant. He looked at her in the empty autumn square, in the cold pale light of the last evening of the fair, and felt the thing that had been building since the moment he saw her go still in the crowd come together into something complete and permanent. I know, he said. And then, because she had asked him to say the whole sentence, I love you, that's it, that's the whole thing. She breathed in, let it out. In the Ashwalk tongue, she said quietly, the word for it is something closer to, you are the direction I face. She met his eyes. That is what I am telling you. He reached across the table and took her hand, and she turned her palm up and closed her fingers around his. And they sat like that while the cold wind moved through the empty square and the lantern on the nearest post swung, and the town of Warden crossing settled into its off-season quiet. A week later, at the end of a road that turned from packed dirt to salt-grass track to the bare granite path of Carruth Point Headland, Rasha Ashwalker rode her gray mule up the last rise and stopped at the top and looked at the lighthouse. It was a thick stone tower, 60 feet of gray granite, with the attached keeper's house hunched against it on the landward side like something growing. The sea was enormous and gray-green beyond it, alive with the particular muscular energy of autumn water, and the sky above it was the kind of enormous sky that only exists when there is nothing but water on 3 sides, and you are standing on the highest point of the land. The light was dark because it was midday, but she could see the bronze of the lamp housing rotating slowly in the wind, catching and losing the cloud-filtered sun. Isaac was on the path below, having heard the mule coming, and he was standing at the paddock gate with the fence post he'd been working on in one hand and his shirt sleeves rolled up, and he was grinning up at her in the completely unguarded way she had realized, over the past week's absence, she had been thinking about more than she'd meant to. She rode down the last slope to him. The south post is repaired, he said. I can see that, she said. The lamp oil arrived yesterday, he said. And there's wood enough for the winter. Good, she said. She dismounted from the mule, which immediately went for the grass at the paddock edge with single-minded intention. She stood in front of Isaac on the granite path, with the sea behind her and the lighthouse above them, and the wind doing something tremendous with her loose hair. Well, he said. Well, she said. She looked at the tower, at the sea, at the enormous sky and the clean, salt-bright emptiness of the headland, and she felt something she had not felt in 8 months and perhaps longer than that, the particular ease of a person who has arrived, not just stopped. She looked at him. Show me the light room, she said. He opened the paddock gate and latched it behind the mule, and led her up the path to the lighthouse door, which was iron-bound oak weathered silver by decades of sea air. Inside, the tower smelled of lamp oil and stone and the cold mineral scent of salt. The staircase wound upward in a tight spiral, and he went first and she followed, and with every turn the sound of the sea grew and the view through the slit windows expanded, the headland, the dark water, the line of the horizon, wider and wider, until they stepped out onto the lamp gallery at the top, and the full sea opened up around them in every direction. She stood at the iron railing and looked at it. The wind was very strong up here, direct and cold, and the horizon was 15 miles in every direction and unbroken. There, Isaac said beside her, pointing north along the coast to where a dark shape was visible on the water moving slowly south. That's the timber carrier out of Garveyport. She goes past every week. He traced the line of the rocks below. And those are the Carruth teeth, that's what the fishermen call them, 20 feet below at high tide. The light turns the ships 4 degrees west before they reach the shallows. She watched the distant timber carrier make its slow way down the coast, and thought about the 2 times she'd been on a ship in these waters, and had seen the Carruth light from the deck, a warm, fixed point in the dark, and had not thought about the person who tended it. 4 degrees, she said. 4 degrees, he confirmed. It's the difference between rock and open water. She looked at the light mechanism, the bronze housing, the polished reflector, the clockwork gearing that rotated the beam. You wind it every 4 hours in a storm watch, she said. You told me. Yes, he said, a little surprised that she'd held that detail. I will take the midnight watch, she said. During storms. He looked at her. The wind was doing something to his hair that she had looked at before on the road and was looking at now without trying to stop herself. You don't have to, he started. I want to, she said. I told you there are things I know that you do not. I know night watches. I know storms. She turned to face him fully at the gallery railing, with the sea and the sky and the full enormous world behind her, and the Ashwalk soldier's directness in her voice and the warmth she no longer had any interest in hiding. "I told you, Isaac. I said yes, I am here. I am staying." He looked at her with the expression she had been learning to read, the one that started quiet and went somewhere deep. "I know," he said. And then he reached for her, and she let him. And the lighthouse gallery held them both in the cold sea wind, with the Kareth teeth below, and the timber carrier moving past, and the clockwork mechanism waiting for its next rotation. It was much later, after the lamp was lit for the evening, amber light sweeping the dark water in its steady 4-degree arc, after the kitchen fire was going, and there was actual food on the actual table of the actual house for the first time since Isaac had returned to the headland, that she told him about the ceremony. "The walking season ends at the new moon," she said, turning her cup in her hands. "That is 3 weeks from now. I would need to travel to the Ashwalk summer ground, which is 7 days north of here." "All right," Isaac said. "I would need to present the debt completion documents and report to the clan elder." She paused. "And then there is the question of what I report about my intentions." He looked at her across the table. "What are your intentions?" he said. "To stay here," she said. "On this rock, with you." She met his eyes directly in the Ashwalk way that meant this was a formal statement. "But if I declare a partner to the clan elder, there is a process, a formal acknowledgement. It binds the clan's recognition to the partnership." "Like a contract," Isaac said. "Like a contract, with a ceremony and a feast and approximately 40 people who will want to know everything about you," she said. "Will they test me?" Isaac said. "Yes," she said. "The not gentle tests," he said. "Yes," she said, and the real smile was there again, warm and private and aimed at him. "But I will also be there." "That changes the odds significantly," he said. She reached across the table and put her hand over his the same way she had at the bonfire in the empty fair square, deliberate and unhurried. "Come with me in 3 weeks," she said. "Meet the Ashwalk clan, let them test you, eat at our fire." She paused. "And then we come home." He turned his hand over and held hers. "Yes," he said. What followed was 3 weeks on the headland that were, Isaac would think afterward, among the most complete weeks of his adult life. Not because they were eventless. The 3rd week brought a 2-day gale that required both of them at the lamp gallery for the full midnight and dawn watches, passing the winding quay between them in the howl of the wind, while waves broke 60 feet below, and 2 ships navigated safely past the Kareth teeth in the dark. Not because they were without difficulty. Rasha spent the better part of the 2nd week in correspondence with the border court over the Warden complaint, writing responses to the court recorder's questions in her precise angular hand at the kitchen table by lamplight. And there were moments when the weight of it showed on her face, the long exhaustion of 8 months and a purge and a warrant and the constant calculation of safety. But he was there, and she let him be there, and that was the thing that was different. She fixed the south paddock fence and found a 2nd broken post he hadn't noticed and fixed that too. She learned the clockwork mechanism of the beacon lamp with the methodical patience she brought to everything, and by the end of the 1st week could service it from memory. She took the mule down to the village at the headland's base on market day and came back with provisions and 3 pieces of information about local road conditions that she delivered to Isaac as a matter of course, because knowing the roads was what she did, and the roads were now relevant to both of them. And in the evenings, when the lamp was turning and the fire was going and the sea noise filled the house with its constant living sound, they were together in the way that 2 people are when they have stopped managing the distance between them. She was not gentle in the way that some people are gentle. She was direct, and she was fierce, and when she turned her full attention on him, it had the same quality as when she assessed a road or a wound, total and unsparing. But she was warm in a way that had been defended for a long time and was now, slowly and then all at once, entirely open. She reached for him the way she did things, deliberately, without apology, with the complete assurance of a woman who has decided and does not second-guess her decisions. He reached back, equally decided, and the thing that had been building since the fire-lit platform of the harvest fair, since the road to the delta and the bonfire night and the dancing, came home to itself in the keeper's house on the granite headland with the sea sound underneath everything, and the lamp turning overhead, warm and present and real. In the morning she was already at the gallery when he came up, standing at the railing in the gray pre-dawn, watching the water go from black to silver to the pale blue of early light. He came to stand beside her and she leaned back against him without turning, and they watched the horizon come clear. "The timber carrier will be past in an hour," she said. 40 minutes, he said. "She runs fast with a north wind." She turned her head to look at him over her shoulder. 40 minutes, she conceded. He put his arms around her from behind and she let him, and they stood on the gallery in the cold early light while the world opened up around them, all water and sky and the beginning of the day. 38 minutes later, the timber carrier out of Garve Port came around the northernmost point of the coast, and Rasha said, 38, and he could hear the real smile in her voice without seeing it. They went north at the end of the third week. When the new moon was 2 days away, Isaac on his horse and Rasha on her mule, the gray mule fully recovered from the long southern journey, and apparently opinionated about the northern roads up through the valley and into the higher country where the trees were bare now, and the hillsides had the stripped, clean look of deep autumn, the sky enormous and pale above the ridges. The Ashwalk summer ground was in a wide valley 7 days north, ringed by hills that kept the worst of the winter wind off. It was larger than Isaac had imagined, a permanent structure of long houses and workyards at the center, surrounded by the seasonal camp additions of returning clan members, the smoke of multiple fires, the smell of cured meat and wood smoke and worked leather. Children ran between the buildings. He'd been told there would be children. It was the clan's home, and several large dogs came to investigate the horses with measured, professional interest. When Rasha rode in, people stopped what they were doing. It was not dramatic. No one cried out, no one ran. But there was a quality of stillness that moved through the camp like a ripple in water, and then people began moving toward them, not rushing but steady, the way people move toward a fire that has just been lit when they've been cold a long time. She dismounted, and the first person to reach her was an older woman, broad-shouldered and gray-braided, with the look of long authority, the clan elder, Isaac realized. Rasha met her formally, with the closed-fist gesture he'd come to understand was the Ashwalk greeting between people of equal standing, and the elder returned it, and then did something he hadn't expected. She put both hands on Rasha's face, briefly, the way you put your hands on someone's face when they've been gone a very long time and you need to confirm they are real. Then the elder looked past Rasha to Isaac. He sat straight on his horse and met her gaze. "Who is this?" the elder said, in accented but clear common tongue. "Who rides in with my war guide?" "Followed me unbidden," Rasha said, and there was something in her voice, pride. He realized that was what it was, a pride she was not hiding. "His name is Isaac Sawyer. He keeps the Kareth light." She looked at him and he swung down from the horse. "He is serious," she said. "Test him." The elder looked at him for a long, assessing moment. "Lighthouse keeper," she said. "Yes," Isaac said. "Can you keep a fire through a storm night?" the elder said. "Ask her," Isaac said, nodding toward Rasha. She was there. The elder's mouth did the same thin compression that Rasha's did, and he understood with a lurch of affection that this was where Rasha had gotten it. "The tests begin at dawn," the elder said. "Tonight you eat at our fire." She turned and walked back toward the long houses, and the camp reassembled itself around the returned debt walker with a warmth that Isaac found, undid something in his chest that he had not known was constricted. The tests were, as promised, not gentle. 3 days of them, endurance work in the pre-dawn cold, reading tracks in the frost, 2 hours in a smoke-filled low room that was apparently a traditional test of something the elder refused to translate until after he'd done it, and a final evaluation by the clan's 4 senior guides, who sat across from him at a low table and asked him questions about maps and tide charts and what you do when your light goes out in a storm. He answered honestly and sometimes incorrectly, and always without pretending to know things he didn't. And on the third evening, the elder sat across from him at the main fire and looked at him steadily and said, "You are not afraid of what you do not know." "I try not to be," he said. "That is the first quality," she said. "The second is that my war guide has been a solo walker for 8 months and you followed her without being asked and she did not kill you." "She came close a few times," Isaac said. The elder made the thin compressed lip expression. "The third quality," she said, "is that you stepped in front of a knife for her." She looked at his bandaged arm, the dressing changed but still visible. "In our custom, that act names you." "Names me what?" Isaac said. "Hers," the elder said simply. "And she names herself yours. This is the Ashwalk way." She looked across the fire to where Rasha was sitting with 2 of the senior guides, and Rasha looked up at the same moment, a reflex, as though she'd felt his attention, and her amber eyes came to his face across the fire with the same quality they'd had on the lamp gallery in the early morning, open and sure and entirely present. The ceremony was held on the new moon evening, which was the end of the walking season. It was not long. The Ashwalk formal rites had the quality of everything Rasha did, which was precision without excess, but it was complete. Rasha presented the debt completion documents to the elder and received the walking season acknowledgement. Then she presented Isaac, and the elder formally accepted him as her declared partner, which in Ashwalk custom meant something closer to what Isaac understood as a profound mutual commitment, witnessed by the whole clan, binding in the way that things are binding when 100 people have heard them said. He said yes. He meant it more than he had ever meant any word in his life. She looked at him when he said it with that expression he had first seen on the platform steps of the Warden crossing fair, when the composed certainty had cracked for a moment and the full, unguarded thing had looked out. It was looking out now, warm and open and decided. The feast after was long and loud, and involved a great deal of the Ashwalk fermented grain drink, which Isaac discovered was substantially stronger than anything available at the Warden Crossing Harvest Fair, and he ate more smoked venison than he had thought possible, and several clan members who had initially looked at him with the particular evaluating neutrality that a stranger in a clan gathering receives were, by the second hour of the feast, talking to him about tide patterns and winter road conditions with the unself-conscious directness that was. He was learning simply how the Ashwalk talked to people they decided were all right. Rasha sat beside him through all of it, close enough that their shoulders touched, and occasionally turned to say something directly into his ear with a warm specificity that made the nearest clan members look away diplomatically. And he found that he had never in his adult life felt less alone than he did sitting at a fire surrounded by 100 people he had known for 3 days, with her shoulder against his and the new moon above the valley. They left the Ashwalk summer ground 2 days later, with food enough for the road and a second set of saddlebags Rasha's clan sister had pressed on them, and the elder's formal written endorsement of Rasha's permanent residency at Kareth Point for the border court records, which was a practical document but also, Rasha told him as they rode out, an Ashwalk elder's way of saying, "We know where you are, and we approve." The road home was 7 days, and it was cold but clear, and they made good time because Rasha knew every shortcut in the northern pass roads and Isaac knew the coastal track better than the road maps showed, and they talked on horseback in the way they had talked on the road to the delta, easy and unhurried, and the conversation ranged further now, into things they hadn't yet said to each other, the accumulated details of 2 lives being shared across the daylight hours of 7 days. She told him about the Ashwalk War before the treaty, the 2 years of border skirmishes that had made her a war guide and a clan leader at 25, the decisions she'd made, and the ones she still turned over sometimes at night. He told her about the ship that had gone down on the Kareth Teeth in the fog and the carved wooden fish on the windowsill, and about his father, who had been a quiet, careful man who had loved the sea in the way that some people love difficult things, completely, without explanation. I am like that, Rasha said after he'd finished. Like what? I love difficult things completely, she said, without explanation. She looked at him sideways and he understood. I am not difficult, he said. You are entirely difficult, she said, with the real smile. You followed a stranger onto a dangerous road and stepped in front of a knife and told me you loved me before I had said it first. That is very difficult, Isaac Sawyer. I'll try to be more straightforward in the future, he said. Please do not, she said, and reached across from the mule's saddle to take his hand briefly. The horses walking close enough in the narrow pass that it was possible, her grip warm and certain before she let go. They came home to Carruth Point on the 7th afternoon, the headland rising gray-green from the sea road, the lighthouse visible from 2 miles out, the beacon already lit for the early dark of deep autumn. The mule recognized the paddock track and picked up her pace, and the horses followed. Isaac opened the paddock gate and she brought the mule in, and he took the saddle and she took the saddlebags, and they worked together with the easy efficiency of 2 people who have been working alongside each other long enough that the division of tasks sorts itself out without discussion. The house was cold from 2 weeks empty, but the wood was laid in the hearth, and he lit it while she unpacked the saddlebags, and within 20 minutes the kitchen was warm and the lamp in the study was burning, and the smell of the house salt and wood smoke and the faint particular smell of lamp oil, the smell that was, Isaac thought, simply the smell of the lighthouse and now also the smell of home, filled the rooms. Rasha set the last of the supplies on the kitchen shelf and turned around. He was looking at her. What? She said. Nothing, he said. You're here. She held his gaze, and the amber gold of her eyes was warm in the firelight, and she crossed the kitchen to him with the deliberate certainty that was how she did everything, and put her arms around him, and he held her. Outside, the Carruth light turned its steady 4-degree arc across the dark water, and somewhere north on the coast the timber carrier was making its way south, and the beam found it and gave it clear water, and the sea went on and on. 2 months later, a letter arrived from the border court in Warden crossing. Rasha brought it up from the village on the day of its arrival, still sealed, and set it on the kitchen table while Isaac was servicing the lamp mechanism. When he came down, she was standing at the window looking at the sea with the letter in her hand. It's from the regional adjudicator's office, she said. He washed his hands and sat down at the table. She sat across from him and broke the seal and spread the letter between them, and they read it together. The Purity Warden organization had been formally dissolved in the 6 border counties, effective as of the previous month. The regional adjudicator had ruled their operating charter invalid based on the accumulated complaints filed over the previous 2 years, of which the Warden crossing incident had been the latest and most publicly witnessed. The 3 wardens from the fair had been charged with unlawful assault and were pending a hearing. The Merchants Guild officer who had filed the original oathbreaker warrant against Rasha was removed from his position and facing a separate inquiry into the water rights manipulation. The letter also contained, on a separate page in a different hand, a personal note from adjudicator Vane which read, "The persistence and courage of those who filed the original complaint at Warden Crossing made this resolution possible. Border justice is slow, but it does not always fail." Rasha set the letter down. She was quiet for a long moment. "It is not everything," she said at last. "There are settlements the wardens touch that will take years to recover, people who left and have not come back." "I know," Isaac said. "But it is something," she said. "It is something," he agreed. She looked up from the letter at him, and the thing in her face was not triumph. It was quieter and more durable than triumph, the particular expression of someone who has fought a long, unseen fight and has come out the other side not undamaged but unbowed. He reached across the table and put his hand over hers on the letter. "The water rights," she said. "I need to file the confirmation with the Ashwalk elder. The clan should know the legal standing is secure." "I'll come with you in the spring," he said. She looked at him with the amber gold eyes open and sure. "You will have to leave the lighthouse for 10 days," she said. The lamp will need a keeper. Aldrich Moss mentioned his nephew is learning the trade, Isaac said. He's been asking for a practicum position. 10 days in the spring would work. Rasha looked at him for a long moment. You have already arranged this, she said. I was thinking ahead, he said. She made the sound, the one that was not quite a laugh. And then it became the real laugh, warm and genuine. And he thought, as he had thought every time he heard it, that it was one of the best sounds he had ever listened to from the lighthouse gallery or anywhere else. She picked up the adjudicator's letter and folded it carefully, and put it with the warrant counterclaim and the court documents in the wooden box on the study shelf. The box that now held, alongside the legal paperwork, the certification of their Ashwalk partnership declaration, witnessed by the elder and stamped with the clan seal. She came back to the kitchen and stood in the doorway with the fire behind her and the sound of the sea filling the house. Isaac, she said. Yes. I said no 4 times, she said. He raised his eyebrows. You did. I am glad you kept asking, she said with the real smile full and warm. So am I, he said. She crossed the kitchen and took his face in her hands the way the elder had taken hers in the Ashwalk camp, with the quality of someone confirming something real, and kissed him with the deliberate, unhurried certainty of a woman who has decided and is not going to undecide. Upstairs, the clockwork mechanism turned the beacon in its steady arc, 4 degrees west of the Kareth teeth, and the sea was rough and bright outside the windows, and the lighthouse keeper's house on the gray granite headland was, for the first time in a very long time, not quiet with the quiet of one person alone, but full with the warm and specific noise of 2 people who have found each other and have the extraordinary, hard-won luck of knowing it. The lamp turned. The sea ran. The light held. And in the morning, as she had every morning since she'd come home to the headland, Rasha Ashwalker was already on the gallery when Isaac climbed up, standing at the iron railing with her hands loose and her braid over one shoulder and her eyes on the horizon, watching the water come from black to silver to blue, waiting, as he had begun to think of it, for the day to begin. He came to stand beside her, and she leaned back into him without turning, the same as every morning, and they watched together as the coast revealed itself in the growing light. The timber carrier, she said. 20 minutes. 22, he said. She tilted her head, which meant she was acknowledging the possibility without conceding it, and he put his arms around her and held the warmth of her against the cold morning air. And the lighthouse stood on its granite headland above the Kareth teeth with its light turning, and the sea went on, and they were home.